logistics hubs for foreign trafficking networks, including Mexican cartels, Albanian syndicates, and Italian and 'ndrangheta groups, creating a criminal governance overlap where state officials allegedly provided protection in exchange for financial flows that helped the regime survive sanctions. While inside Venezuela, state collapse enabled the rise of transnational gangs, including Tren de Aragua, which evolved from a prison-based criminal network into a hemispheric threat, expanding along migration routes into Colombia, Peru, Chile, Ecuador, Brazil, Bolivia, and eventually into the United States, where U.S. law enforcement has documented its presence in cities including Miami, New York, Chicago, Denver, and Texas border regions, engaging in extortion, kidnapping, sex trafficking, debt bondage, and violent crime, particularly targeting Venezuelan migrants, with U.S. Homeland Security investigations and the FBI identifying Tren de Aragua as a priority transnational criminal organization by 2024, though the group's designation as a formal terrorist organization remains debated. Its criminal impact on migrant communities has been documented by U.S. federal agencies and Latin American police coalitions. Meanwhile, layered on top of criminal allegations is the geopolitical layer, the most strategically sensitive part of the story, because Venezuela has hosted sustained engagement from three major U.S. rivals, China, Russia, and Iran, each entering through different vectors, but converging into a strategic challenge for Washington. And while China's engagement accelerated after 2007, reaching over $60 billion in development loans by the mid-2020s, many backed by oil-for-debt agreements that granted Chinese companies long-term operational roles in Venezuelan oil infrastructure, while Huawei provided telecommunications and digital surveillance systems reportedly used by Venezuelan intelligence services for political monitoring. Russia entered primarily through the energy sector via Rosneft, which provided sanctions-busting logistics and technical oil support, but also expanded into military cooperation, selling Sukhoi fighters, Kalashnikov rifles, and air defense systems, including the S-300, while conducting joint strategic bomber training missions. And intelligence assessments from Western defense analysts have indicated the presence of Russian military contractors inside Venezuela, including personnel believed to be linked to the Wagner Group, which denies direct affiliation, but whose personnel overlap has been widely documented in intelligence circles, while Iran has delivered sanctioned fuel shipments in exchange for Venezuelan gold transfers, and U.S. intelligence assessments in 2020 to 2025 repeatedly indicated IRGC-linked security cooperation inside Venezuela, though not missile basing. The presence of Iranian security advisors, drone cooperation, and intelligence exchange was cited by U.S. officials as a strategic concern, even as Washington clarified that it was addressing the crisis through sanctions, regional military partnerships, diplomatic coalitions, and energy market strategy, not invasion. And yet, invasion narratives continue circulating in political discourse because of historical parallels to 1989's Operation Just Cause in Panama, when the U.S. captured dictator Manuel Noriega, who, like Maduro today, faced U.S. drug indictments and maintained power through electoral fraud and military loyalty. But unlike Panama, Venezuela has not hosted U.S. military bases. No military intervention has been attempted. And Washington has repeatedly affirmed that it supports a democratic transition led by Venezuelans, not imposed externally, even as legal scholars continue debating extraterritorial enforcement precedents such as Israel's 1960 capture of Nazi officer Adolf Eichmann in Argentina or the 1989 capture of Noriega by the U.S. Debates that remain theoretical in Venezuela's case because the U.S. has not attempted such enforcement. So, when we look at the whole picture, what emerges is not a single headline, but a mosaic. A government accused of protecting drug corridors but denying it. A presidency declared victorious without transparency. A political opposition dismantled through institutions. A country holding the world's largest oil reserves but unable to produce. global rivals expanding influence through debt, energy, and security cooperation, and 7.7 million displaced civilians reshaping Latin American demographics, labor markets, border politics, and humanitarian systems, all of which makes Venezuela not a closed chapter, but a still unfolding story where the decisive question is not what happened, but what happens next. Whether Venezuela can rebuild institutions, stabilize migration, restore energy production, and reintegrate into the region through internal political transition and economic reconstruction, rather than military force. U.S. expanded temporary protected status, TPS, for Venezuelans and implemented humanitarian parole programs, allowing hundreds of thousands to enter legally. These measures, by design, were temporary, humanitarian, and reactive. They did not address the root causes driving continued displacement, nor were they intended as political recognition of Maduro, whose legitimacy Washington had already rejected through diplomatic channels. Now, legitimacy is another pillar of this story because the Venezuelan political system under Maduro did not collapse overnight. It eroded through institutional capture, electoral engineering, judicial interference, media suppression, and the systematic neutralization of political competition, and this erosion reached its most dramatic public rupture during the July 2024 presidential election, when the government-controlled National Electoral Council, CNE, declared Maduro the winner with 51% of votes, but refused to publish precinct-level tallies as required by Venezuelan law, prompting international election observers, including the Carter Center and the European Union, to issue unusually blunt statements documenting structural irregularities, lack of transparency, restricted monitoring access, and interference against opposition parties. And while the opposition coalition published its own collected data, indicating that Edmundo González Urrutia won by a significant margin, echoing exit polling trends, Maduro maintained control inside the country through military loyalty and support from state institutions already staffed by political allies, including the Supreme Court, TSJ, which had long been packed with government loyalists, eliminating judicial independence, while the National Assembly, originally won by the opposition in 2015, had been functionally neutered by the creation of a parallel pro-government legislature.